Imagine a passage with your own signature on it. Not figuratively, but truly. A passage already constructed, already open, already labeled with your identification on a display you can spot from the curb. The single barrier between you and what lies within is simply whether you thought to signal. That passage exists in a federal record right now. It resides on a site you have likely explored in the past. The capital behind it is not a rebate scheme, not a state subsidy, not some dense fiscal maneuver that only individuals with experts who bill $400 an hour understand. It is your personal wealth, funds you already contributed, capital the network retained longer than was appropriate. Funds that have been resting there because the paperwork that triggers its release was never submitted. This presentation exists to clarify one particular inquiry. Why do so many elders born prior to 1971, individuals who labored for decades, individuals who funded this network for their whole vocations, walk away from capital that is already legally theirs? I have dedicated a massive amount of duration reflecting on that inquiry. And what I uncovered is not basic. It is not a single explanation. It is 5 explanations, and everyone relates to a particular document that either was never submitted, was submitted incorrectly, or was never presented. By the conclusion of this presentation, you will recognize exactly what every one of those documents is, exactly where to find it, and exactly who qualifies. Prior to anything else, a vital observation. This presentation is for instructional and data purposes only. It is not individual tax guidance or legal representation. Fiscal contexts differ. Always seek advice from a certified CPA, enrolled agent, or eligible tax expert before taking steps on your particular figures. Everything I outline here is publicly confirmable through irs.gov and ssa.gov. I will provide you the specific document figures and sites so you can examine each one personally. There are 5 documents. Let us discover why they remain hidden. Begin with the most basic version of the inquiry. If you are retired subsisting on pension funds, IRA payouts, or Social Security, where does your wealth actually travel before it hits your financial account? Most folks have a broad intuition. Levies are removed. The state takes its portion. What arrives in your account is what remains. Here is what most folks do not have a vivid portrait of, whether the quantity being retained is the precise quantity. Not nearly precise, the factual precise quantity based on who you are, what you gain now, and what allowances you currently qualify for. This is where the initial document joins the narrative. It is termed Document W4P, and it is a retention choice document for pension and IRA payouts. You can fetch it for free at irs.gov right now. When a pension scheme organizes your monthly benefit, or when your IRA manager begins issuing mandatory minimum payouts, those entities require a figure. How much should they retain for federal revenue levy? In the lack of specific guidance from you, most networks rely on a standard scale. And that standard scale is almost always determined without recognizing your full tax portrait. It does not recognize your age-linked allowances. It does not recognize your reporting status this year versus 3 years ago. It does not recognize whether your other gain vanished when you retired. So the standard retention is a prediction, a wary prediction, which means it tends to stay high. Here is what that looks like in reality. A retired male single in his late 60s subsisting on a $38,000 pension has 10% instantly retained from every payout over the span of a year. That is $3,800 retained. But once you consider the basic allowance for his age group, the extra senior allowance that starts at 65, and his factual gain portrait, his real federal levy on that pension gain might be closer to $1,400, not $3,800. That $2,400 void is not the state robbing from him. It is him blindly lending the state $200 a month without interest until April arrives and he receives a check that feels like a bonus, but is actually just his personal wealth returning to him a year late. Document W4P is how you fix it. You fetch the document, finish the retention worksheet on the reverse, and turn it into your pension manager or your IRA provider. Once they record it, your retention shifts the following month. Not next tax period, next month. This is not the most flashy document on the list. It is the most instantly usable one. If you have ever received a big federal check in April and felt slightly comforted by it, that emotion is worth studying. A check means you overpaid during the year, and the wealth you overpaid rested somewhere gaining nothing while you could have utilized it. Here's something that shocks almost everyone the initial time they hear it. Social Security benefits arrive with zero federal revenue levy retained. Not a tiny fraction, not a lessened fraction, zero. The standard is that nothing is removed before the wealth hits you. For a segment of retirees, that is totally accurate. If your total gain stays below the limit where Social Security becomes taxable, no retention is exactly right. Nothing should be removed because nothing is owed. But for a massive number of folks born prior to 1971, especially those with pension gain, IRA payouts, or other retirement gains stacked on top of their Social Security benefit, some of that Social Security fund is taxable. And zero retention on a taxable gain flow is a blueprint for a harsh shock in April. The April levy demand, it arrives when folks are not expecting it. They owe more than they calculated. Frequently, they owe underpayment fines on top of the levy itself, billed because the IRS did not obtain enough wealth throughout the year. Even though nobody advised them to transmit it, the wealth was never retained. Nobody approved it. The document that fixes this is termed Document W4V. It is a discretionary retention request, and you can fetch it from ssa.gov. Document W4V provides you 4 retention scale choices: 7%, 10%, 12%, or 22%. You pick the scale that most nearly fits what you actually owe based on your gain and tax context, and you turn the document into the Social Security office moving ahead. That fraction is removed from each monthly benefit before it hits your account, and you bypass the April trap. But here's the other side of this that receives almost no notice. Some seniors are heavily over-retained on their Social Security. They picked the 22% scale years ago when their total gain was higher. Their gain has since fallen because they ceased working, traded a home, or finished taking big IRA payouts. Their factual levy scale on the Social Security gain is now closer to 9% or 10%, but the 22% is still departing every month. Imagine a pair both in their early 70s, both receiving Social Security, total benefit around $34,000 a year. Years ago, one partner organized 22% retention when their domestic gain was much higher. Their present tax context puts the factual federal debt on that total benefit much closer to 9%. The gap is nearly $2,000 to $2,200 per year in extra retention capital that is theirs, wealth they require, capital that is exiting their monthly funds needlessly and returning in April as a check they would never have required in the first place. A fresh document W4V turned into the SSA is the fix. You can do it online through your My Social Security portal at ssa.gov, by post or in person at your nearby Social Security hub. The point is that this document functions in both ways. Under-retained, it stops the shock bill. Over-retained, it returns wealth to your account every single month moving ahead. Most folks have never been advised they had a choice. The document is how you exercise one. In 2019, the IRS performed something that did not make global news, was not broadcast on screen, and went totally unseen by a big segment of the folks it was crafted to assist. They produced a distinct tax filing document specifically for elders, Document 1040-SR. The SR represents senior, present free at irs.gov, and accepted by every top tax tool program, crafted specifically for filers who are 65 years old or older. Now, the doubting view to this is logical. Is this just a basic 1040 with larger font? And the truthful answer is it does have larger font, which counts, but that is not why this document exists. What is integrated into the 1040-SR that makes a structural gap is the specific front-facing handling of the allowances and gain types that apply specifically to folks in this life period. The basic allowance for seniors is higher than the basic allowance for younger filers. There is an extra allowance quantity once you hit 65. If you are 65 or older and vision impaired, there is an extra quantity on top of that. These are combined allowances that massively diminish what you owe, and the 1040-SR has them displayed in their own specific area. On the basic 1040, they are not main and center. On the 1040-SR, you cannot ignore them. The document also has neater integrated areas for the two gain types, most typical in retirement, Social Security, and pension payouts. The guides and line cues are mapped for a retirement gain portrait, not a working person's gain portrait. Here is the usage step that counts. If you utilize a tax expert or a CPA, ask one specific inquiry before you approve your next filing. Are you reporting my levies on document 1040-SR? If the answer is no, ask why not. If the explanation is not specific and vivid, something to do with your individual context, that is worth debating more. If you report your own levies using tools, verify your account details to validate that the tool recognizes you are 65 or older. That data usually prompts the site to direct you to the 1040-SR instantly. If you are not certain whether it did, search for a document-used validation somewhere in the recap before you turn in. Nobody is fined for reporting the basic 1040, but the 1040-SR exists because the IRS confessed that the basic document was not grabbing the allowances seniors qualified for as vividly or as steadily as it should. Utilizing it is not a trick. It is utilizing the document the state crafted for folks in your context. There is a silent tax error that has been expanding in some retirement funds for decades. It is not the outcome of deceit. It is not the outcome of a blunder anyone performed in the classic sense. It is the outcome of a monitoring gap, specifically the gap in submitting one specific IRS document during certain funding years. And for folks who did not submit it, the expense can be massive. Here is the context you require. When most folks fund a basic IRA, those fundings are tax deductible. You deposit wealth in, it diminishes your taxable gain for that year, and when you take payouts in retirement, you pay revenue levy on the entire quantity exiting. That is the basic direct version. But some folks, specifically those whose domestic gain passed the deduction caps in certain years, performed what are termed non-deductible fundings to their IRA. They deposited post-tax wealth, capital they had already settled revenue levy on because they still desired the tax-delayed expansion perk of the account. Non-deductible fundings produce what is termed IRA basis. It is the segment of your IRA total that has already been taxed. When you finally take payouts, that segment should not be taxed again. Should not be, but frequently is. The explanation is Document 8606. Document 8606 is the IRS file that monitors your total, non-deductible IRA fundings. It is submitted with your yearly tax report in any year you perform a non-deductible funding, and its single role is to advise the IRS. This segment of my IRA was funded with wealth I already settled levy on. So, do not levy it again when it exits. If that document was not submitted, and for many folks it was not, either because their expert ignored it or because they merely did not recognize it was needed, the IRS has no data of the basis. The IRA manager reports every payout as fully taxable gain. The whole total looks like pre-tax wealth, and you pay revenue levy on capital you already settled revenue levy on twice on the same wealth. The quantities involved can be massive. If someone performed non-deductible fundings reaching $30,000 or $40,000 over their laboring years without steadily submitting document 8606, that whole quantity could end up taxed again in retirement at whatever their present revenue levy scale is. At a 22% federal scale, that is $6,600 to $8,800 in levies paid on wealth that should have been given out tax-free. Two things are worth recognizing about this context. First, if you have performed past non-deductible fundings without submitting document 8606, it may be possible to submit corrected reports for those old years to fix and record the basis after the fact. That is a debate for a skilled tax expert. Not something to attempt by yourself, but the choice exists. Second, this document is vital for anyone who has performed or is considering a backdoor Roth shift. a plan where you fund a basic IRA and then shift it to a Roth. Without document 8606 on record, showing that the first funding was non-deductible, the shift looks fully taxable on screen. You end up paying levy on wealth that was already taxed. The document is the data trail that stops it. If you have funded a basic IRA at any point in your vocation, and you are not certain that all of those fundings were deductible, this is worth mentioning to your CPA before the end of the reporting period. The debate takes minutes. The results of not having it can pile up over years. This is the one I stated at the start of this presentation you would desire to hear. If you were born prior to 1971 and you were joined in Medicare, there is a tool in the Medicare billing network that may be adding a massive extra cost to your monthly Part B fee based on gain data that is 2 years old. Gain that may no longer show anything about your present fiscal context. Let me clarify how this functions because the steps of it are what make it so silently harmful. Medicare. Part B pays for clinic care. The basic fee in 2026 is $185 per month. For many beneficiaries, that is the figure. But for those whose gain passes certain caps, Medicare bills more, frequently much more. This extra cost is termed IRMAA, which represents Revenue-Linked Monthly Adjustment Amount, and it applies to Part B and Part D fees alike. The gain caps and extra cost quantities for 2026 based on data from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services function like this. For single filers, IRMAA extra costs begin when modified total gross gain passes $106,000. The extra cost at the initial level adds $74 per month to the basic fee. At higher gain levels, the extra fee can rise to $443 per month per individual. For married pairs reporting together, the gain caps are higher, but the extra costs apply to every partner separately, meaning a pair in top levels can face total extra cost bills reaching into thousands of dollars per year. Now, here is the segment that hits retirees specifically. Medicare does not examine your gain from this year. It examines your gain from 2 years ago. Specifically, it examines the most recent tax report on record, which for 2026 fees means your 2024 report. Reflect on what 2024 looked like for someone who retired that year. They labored for the initial 6, 7, 8 months. Their gain was high. Then they retired in the autumn. Their 2024 modified total gross gain was high. Not because of anything strange, but because they were laboring. Now it is 2026. They are subsisting on Social Security and a small pension. Their present yearly gain might be $48,000 or $55,000 total. But Medicare is billing them an IRMAA extra cost based on that 2024 figure, the one that included all those laboring months, the figure that no longer exists, gain they will never get again. They are paying an extra cost for a fiscal context that ceased. The Social Security Office, which manages Medicare fee billing, integrated a fix tool into the network for exactly this case. It is termed Document SSA 44, and it is a life-altering event challenge. Document SSA 44 allows you to request that Medicare utilize your present predicted gain instead of the 2-year-old figure when determining your fee. There are 8 eligible life-altering events that make you fit to submit it. Marriage, split, loss of a partner, labor stoppage meaning retirement, drop-in hours or gain, loss of gain, producing asset, loss of pension gain, obtainment of a one-time payment payout in an old year that grew the gain figure on record. The most typical eligible event for retirees is the 4th one, labor stoppage. You ceased laboring. That is the event that solo qualifies. Here's a specific case that shows what this document is worth. A pair, both 67, both retired in 2024 halfway, had total gain during their laboring months in 2024 that put them into IRMAA extra cost levels. The male's 2024 gain put him in the 2nd level, adding over $259 per month to his Part B fee. The female's gain put her in the initial level, adding $74 per month to hers. Together, they were paying over $330 per month in total. IRMAA extra costs on top of their basic fees. So their factual 2026 gain, Social Security for both of them, plus a tiny pension from one of them, was around $52,000 total. They were paying fee extra costs based on a scale of gain they had not gotten in nearly 2 years and would never get again. Every one of them submitted document SSA 44, marking the labor stoppage slot and proving their present predicted gain. The Social Security office checked both challenges. Both fees were fixed to the basic scale. Their total monthly savings passed $330 per month. Over the span of the year, including return of extra costs paid earlier in the year before the challenges were processed, their whole total savings passed $5,000, one document each, free at ssa.gov, about 20 minutes to finish. No lawyer, no expert, just the correct document at the correct time. Document SSA-44 can be turned in online through your My Social Security portal at ssa.gov, posted to your nearby Social Security hub, or brought in person. The SSA can also be reached by line at 1-800-77-21213 to guide you through the steps. Once granted, fixes typically start within 1 to 2 billing periods. If you are currently paying an IRMAA extra cost on your Medicare fee, and your gain has fallen since the year Medicare is basing that extra cost on, because you retired, because you dropped your hours, because of any of the 8 eligible events, this document exists to fix it. Not eventually this year. Let me zoom out now and examine all 5 from a broader view because there is something joining them that goes past the direct steps. Every one of these documents is reactive. They do not occur by themselves. The state does not submit them for you. Your pension manager does not verify whether you are still retaining the correct quantity. Your IRA manager does not signal the missing basis data. Medicare does not warn you when the gain year it utilized to pick your fee is no longer a precise portrait of where you reside. The network is not crafted to return your wealth proactively. It is crafted to retain it until you perform the one thing that opens it. Complete the document that states, it is there. That is the explanation to the inquiry this presentation began with. Why do so many elders leave capital resting in these state networks without grabbing it? Not because the documents are tough, not because the fit is dense, but because nobody ever rested with them and advised them these 5 things resided. Here is the main sequence for where to begin. If you are currently paying a Medicare IRMAA extra cost and your gain has fallen since the year Medicare is examining, document SSA-44 at ssa.gov is your top effect starting point. The monthly cash fix is the biggest of any document on this list, and fixes can be backdated to months you have already overpaid in the present year. If you obtain monthly pension or IRA payouts, and you are receiving a massive federal check each April, or you have never validated whether your retention scale is precise, document w4pirs.gov is your next move. Fetch the document, solve the retention worksheet, and turn it into your scheme manager or manager. If you collect Social Security and you are either shocked every April by a levy demand you were not expecting, or you doubt you are over-retained and providing wealth away monthly that should be in your account, document W4, vssa.gov is where to search. If you utilize a tax expert, validate before your next filing that your report is being submitted on document 104. O-SR, not the basic one, 040. If you report through tools, verify that your age has been precisely put in, so the network directs you to the elder version instantly. And if there is any past of non-deductible IRA fundings in your old years where your gain was past the deduction caps and you still funded a basic IRA, mention document 8606 with your tax expert and ask whether your basis is fully recorded. This one demands an expert talk, but beginning that talk before the end of reporting period is the correct step. This is not a list to place in your later pile. Some of these fixes start within a single billing period. June 30th is a factual date for several of them. The calendar year has a way of limiting the space for fixes to stack. The earlier in the year you act, the more months the fix includes. This presentation began with an inquiry about a passage with your signature on it. Here is what I did not advise you at the start. The passage has been there for years. It did not just show up. For some folks, it has been there since the month they retired. For others, since the initial year they performed a non-deductible IRA funding for others. Still, since Medicare Initial put an extra cost on their fee that no longer showed who they were fiscally. The wealth on the other side is not a bonus, and it is not a windfall. It is yours in the most factual possible way. Your pay, your fundings, your fees held in a network that opens them only when you submit the document that says you recognize how to ask. Some folks will watch this presentation and move on one of these 5 documents this week. Some will transmit it along to a guardian or a sibling or a peer who retired last year and has no clue what document SSA 44 is. Some will bring an inquiry to their CPA that their CPA has been wanting to mention but has not found the right point for. All of those are the correct answer. The passage is still there. It still has your signature on it. Now you recognize how to signal. Tax codes are prone to shift. The data in this presentation shows publicly present queues for the 2026 tax year. Always consult a certified CPA-enrolled agent or eligible tax expert for guidance specific to your context before taking steps. Smart retirement life.